Hey guys, welcome to another OCS World video. My name is Ari,
And my name is Heinrich.
and today we are doing a exhibition game of 3 matches of Smolensk as a walkthrough looking at how experienced players would play the game. It's not part of the tutorial series. It's intended to people who already know how to play the game. So this would be something that I would be directing people at the end of the tutorial series to come take a look at so they can see a expanded example of play. And in this first episode, we're just going to be going through the setup of the game and we're going to go through the first turn of the game. I am the German player and Heinrich is the Russian player. We will be playing with Fog of War, which will appear a little bit cumbersome because I'm going to be looking at Heinrich's hidden units when he's doing his turn, and so it's not going to be an exact simulation of what we can and can't see, but we're just going to be doing it to show you how the masking process works, what each side can see, or at least what the German player can see as he's playing against a Russian player that's using Fog of War. The optional and house rules that we're going to be using are some pretty stock standard ones that you're going to find against most opponents. I'll just bring them up here in the manual. Let's see. So first of all is where have we have it here? I don't think we're using any of the 21.0 optional rules. I believe we're just using house rules, the first of which is artillery factors, which is allowed artillery to fight less than full barrage costs. Barrage losses, which is roll dice to randomize steps lost. And one more, which is effects of losses, which is particularly relevant to this game. 4-step division down to its last step is quarter attacking, half defending. These are some of the standard ones that you might find. Effects of losses is one you might find more often in Eastern Front games like this with 4-step German divisions. So with that being said, I believe we are ready to get straight into the setup. Let me just pull up the scenario notes in the Smolensk manual. We're not going to go over the victory conditions. I assume you're already going to be familiar with them. If you have gone through my Smolensk overview rule reading video, which will come out as an addendum to this video. But as a setting up players, we will go over the scenario notes pretty quick. First turn, the 8th of July. We're not going to be playing a full game. It's just 3 turns. First plays the Axis, but the Soviets set up first. And just a quick note for the Soviet players, Soviets are in disarray, all of their ground units move at half on the first turn. This can be further adjusted by mode effects, Axis organic trucks set up full, and there's a few extra things here for me to do with my German Panzer divisions. I will get to that in my setup phase. So, Heinrich, are you ready to set up?
Yeah, I am. So maybe before I start setting up, I say a few things about general Soviet strategy in Smolensk, because that will also guide my setup to some extent. Now, it will come as no surprise when I say that the German army is vastly superior to the Red Army at this stage of the war. It enjoys higher mobility, higher action ratings. So I have to be very wary of being encircled. I'm probably going to lose every single combat. But the German player is facing 2 challenges that I will try to exploit. The first one is once he's gone through his initial quite significant supply stockpile, he will be strapped for supply. So he will get into a situation where he can't move all the units, can't fuel all the units he would like to fuel, can't do all the combats he would like to do. And the second challenge is time. The German player has a deadline on the 19th of August turn. Most of the mobile divisions and also most of the independent units will be removed as they were historically diverted south to take part in the encirclement of Kiev. So my two main aims are going to be A, trying to make the German player spend supply. Every supply token counts here. And my second aim is going to be to slow Ari down as much as I can. Okay, with this being said, we can start with the setup. Let me just check if you can see the map centers on where I click on it.
Yep, that's working.
Yeah, it does. Good. All right. So I'm bringing up now the Soviet setup box. You can do the same.
Yep, I've got it open.
Hang on, I opened the wrong one. Here we go. So I have two groups of units to set up, as well as my Air Force. In the first row, you see units that I can stack with any HQ that is on the map. The second row contains units that are set up in the vicinity of Smolensk, or to be more precise, within 3 hexes of the 2 Smolensk city hexes. And I'm going to start with this group. Okay, so this group contains another HQ, and that HQ I will put into Smolensk proper. I have 2 artillery units, which will also go into the same hex. So in general, obviously Smolensk is very important in this game, as the name of the game gives away. And I'll try to garrison this strongly. I'm also going to try to block the approaches to Smolensk. And to do this, I'm trying to make use of the defensive terrain that is afforded by the swamp hexes to the west and to the north of Smolensk. Putting my units in swamp hexes is not only good because swamp hexes are very close terrain, so very good defensive terrain in OCS, but also it makes it impossible for German units using truck or track movement points to overrun my units in swamp hexes. Okay, so got an 1111 unit. Rifle division. I'm going to put this in this swamp hex here. I have a 1222 rifle division, which I will put here, still within 3 hexes of Smolensk. And I will send this to this area here to try to block the path through the swamps. I have a railroad repair unit. Not sure if I'm ever going to use that. This goes into the southern hex of Smolensk. What else have I got? I've got a tank division. I will put this, let me see. I think I'll put it here. So in this position, it blocks one of the primary roads, or secondary roads, I think that is, leading to Smolensk from the south. And putting the tank division into a swamp hex or even into a heavy woods hex would not be such a good idea, because the combat strength of armored units are reduced in such terrain. But in the open, they can make use of their full combat strength. Now I've got an anti-tank unit. I'll move this here to block the path through the woods. And now I'm left with, let me see, some supply. Going to put that into Smolensk as well. And a wagon point. And let me just move that into Smolensk as well. Okay, that's the first group of units done. Now, because this is the setup, I can set up my transport points either loaded or unloaded, and I will select to set the wagon point up loaded. I'm going to take one of the supply points for this. And that should be it. Right, so now the second group of units I get to set up, they can be stacked with any HQ. And I guess the most important units in this group, let me just move them to the map, are these two NKVD border regiments. They have a very high action rating of 4. So I want to put them into locations I want to hold, at least for a while. And at the beginning, I'll just stack them in Smolensk with the other HQ I just set up there. Now, that doesn't mean I leave both of these NKVD units in Smolensk. I might move them to some other location, but I probably will leave at least one in Smolensk. So what else have I got? I've got the, I think these are fortified regions. Put them in Smolensk as well, with the HQ that is there. So, the general idea is I put as much stuff into Smolensk as I can. Same goes for another artillery unit. And I'll put 2 truck points there. Let's see. I really want to do this. No, actually, I probably won't put the truck points there. 20-0. Yeah. So I'll change my mind about the 2 truck points. And instead, I will place them with a different HQ. With that one down here. The reason for this is that I'm hoping against hope that maybe Mogilev will survive turn 1. And if that is the case, I might consider, and I still have possession or control of the bridges across the river, across the Dnieper. Putting the trucks down there might give me an opportunity to truck some supply into Mogilev, turn it into a Festung. But we'll have to see about that. So let me also put 2 supply points there. And again, I elect to set up the 2 trucks loaded. So I delete the 2 supply points immediately and switch the truck points to the loaded side. And what's left? Okay, I've got another one of these fortified regions, which I want to put here, helping to protect the HQ in Velis. Now I'm doing this because this stack contains a action rating 3 motorcycle regiment, which I intend to move to a different place during my first turn. And that would leave the HQ pretty undefended. So to bolster its defenders a little bit, I'm moving one of these 5-1-1 units there. Okay, I've got another one. I guess the security unit also goes to Smolensk. And what am I going to do with the rest of my supplies? I guess I put everything in Smolensk for now. Smolensk being in a central location makes it also relatively easy to move supply from there using wagon points or truck points to other regions.
Right at the stacking limit there too.
I haven't. Yeah, good point. Stacking limit is 10 east. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, I'm still fine. Still fine. I still can put more in there. All right. I think that is that group of units, and all that's left to do is set up my air units. And before I do that, just in general, what I'm going to do is I'm trying to position the fighters forward. I mean, most of them are set up. I think all of them are set up in act anyway. But I want to have them relatively close to the front lines that they can project patrol zones once I've refitted them next turn. Not because I think they can prevent any hip shoots, but at least I would force Ari to use one of his fighters to, in a fighter sweep, to board them. Now, I'm not going to put them into the airfield, the airbase that's in Vitebsk, or the airbase that's in Orsha, or indeed the airbase that's in Mogilev, because I'm fully expecting that at least two, maybe all three of these cities will be taken by the Germans on the first turn, and that would force me to roll for step losses for my air units. I don't want to do that. Now, the bombers I'm going to place further back, but I want to make sure that they are in range of the main roads that Ari will be using to bring his reinforcements on. Because one of the best uses of the Soviet Air Force in Smolensk is to use them for interdiction missions. And if interdiction missions are successful, that will slow down the movement of German reinforcements that are going to enter from the west, and that is the leitmotif I already alluded to. I'm trying to slow the Germans down as good as I can. So where do I put my units? I've got two long-range air units that I'm going to place in the off-map air. They set up inactive. I'm going to place the two long-range units into the off-map base. So they refit for free. They can, the off-map airbase functions as an infinite supply dump. So I can, if Ari allows me and forgets to put petrol zones up, I might even fly in supply into some of my fortresses. Then we have a fighter in Krasnoye. Which one am I going to use? Okay, let me put this one. So that's inactive. I'm going to mark it as inactive, and I'm going to place it below the airbase. Then I'm going to put another, let me see. What do I want to put there? Okay, I'm going to put another bomber there, an IL-2. I'm placing that fairly far forward because it has a low range, and as I was saying, I'm trying to reach the western map edge for interdiction missions. That also sets up inactive. Then into Smolensk itself, I'll put another fighter. Again, this one sets up inactive. And another one of my IL-2s. Let's use this one. Okay, that's Smolensk. Then in the south, I'll also want to project some patrol zones. Put one fighter into Khrushchev, inactive. And what else? Okay, another one of the IL-2. I think this one actually stays active. Right, now in Roslavl, I'll put my two Su-2s because they have a pretty good range. So I can station them further back. This one sets up active. The other one sets up inactive. Okay. Then Pochinok, another airbase. I think I'm going to put my 2 yaks there. This one sets up inactive. Other one sets up active. And what's left? Smolensk. I could put something here. And I'm going to put these also set up inactive. The PE2, I think that's what it's called. This has a rather long range, so that's why I set it up further back. And something called an SV2. Right. Okay, so that's all my units set up. Now there is a special rule that we are going to use, an optional rule in Smolensk called the wiggle rule. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ari, what this rule allows me to do is to create breakdown regiments. I think.
Yeah, let's just take
Can't
a
remember
turn
how
reading
many
here.
actually. Yeah, please do.
In scenario 5.1/5.2, two changes allow the Soviet player to adjust setup slightly. This option will help defeat optimized axis opening moves. It should always be used in games involving experienced players. A. 6 Soviet full-strength infantry divisions can deploy breakdown regiment. Note 2 AR2 breakdowns are already deployed, which leaves 4 AR2 and 2 AR3 available. Deploy the breakdown anywhere within 2 hexes of parent division. And B, there is also a small change. First motorized division can set up within 1 hex of 1817. Again, this is going to be covered in my reading of the manual, so I assume you have a basic understanding of how this rule works, and now Heinrich will demonstrate how it's applied on the field.
Okay, so now I already briefly mentioned this. Mogilev is very important because it controls 2 bridges across the Dnieper. There's another one in the south near Bykov. And I want to make it as hard for Ari as possible to secure these river crossings early on. I want to make him use one of his bridge markers instead. And therefore, I'm trying to put more units, more steps into Mogilev. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create a breakdown regiment from this action rating 3 rifle division. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm creating a step loss marker, getting a breakdown regiment from my offboard boxes, and that I will place into Mogilev. I've got another rifle division within 2 hexes of Mogilev. Again, I'm going to create a breakdown regiment. This time it's an action rating 2 breakdown regiment, and that I also move into Mogilev. So that's 2. Okay, I'm going to create a breakdown regiment from this rifle division down here, and that will go into Bykov. And because I've now weakened this rifle division, but it guards an important bridge, I'm doing the following. I'm creating a breakdown regiment from this division down here and move that by 2 hexes back to this division, which has just created its breakdown regiment. And at the end of each phase, so in other words, also at the end of the setup phase, breakdown regiments absorb or reabsorb into parental divisions if possible according to the rules. So I'm going to remove that immediately and, put the step loss marker back to 0. There we go. So that was 4, right? So I moved 2 into Mogilev. I moved 2 down here, so I still have 1 left, or 2 left actually. And the 5th breakdown regiment is produced by this action rating 3 rifle division. Let me create a step loss marker. Okay. And I will move this the bridge. So, the general theme is I'm trying to make river crossings as difficult as possible within the limited means that the Red Army has at this stage of the war. Good. I'll not use the 6th breakdown regiment. Leave it at that. And then the second part of the wiggle rule allows me to readjust the position of the 1st Motorized Division. This is probably the most valuable unit the Soviets have. One option would be to try to get it out of harm's way and to save it for later. I'm going to play this a little bit more risky. Leave at least parts of it in the front line. I will use one of the infantry regiments. Are these regiments? I believe so. And move it into Orsha. Again, trying to bolster the defenses, adding an action rating 3 unit there. And let me just briefly think. Okay, I think I know what I wanted to do. Okay, so I'll move this unit by 1 hex to the south to guard this bridge a bit better. Okay. I think that concludes. No, it doesn't. I forgot a little bit something. There's some more wagons I'd like to set up loaded. One up here. Another one here. I think this is pretty much it. Let me just highlight my transport points.
So just so we're on the same page about stacking and all that, do you tend to keep your units, so when you, obviously we're going to be using Fog of War, you keep your revealed combat unit on the top of the stack, is that right?
Right. So
Yeah.
if a unit has a Zoc, that's going to go to the top. This is top
Or,
of the stack.
or just the revealed unit in general will be at the top of the stack, right?
Right, but if
Yeah.
there's a unit with a Zoc in the stack, it has to be on the top. So you need to know which units, which stacks have Zocs, so you can plan the movement of your movement.
You keep your active aircraft on top of the whole stack.
I do.
Yep, no problem.
In general, right? I'm not usually not bothering hiding air units, to be honest. I mean, we
Oh,
can do that.
I don't hide them, more so that I just tend to keep them on top of the airbase, like in the stacking order. Even if they must be revealed, and they are revealed, I usually don't. To each their own. There's really no difference. But my procedure is I usually don't sandwich units between air units, if that makes sense.
I'm not quite sure what you mean. So you have the air units are on top, sure.
So yeah, air unit. No, I don't keep them on. I keep everything on the bottom. I keep the airbase on the bottom, active and inactive on either side of the airbase, and I keep all combat units above anything air related, rather than creating a combat unit sandwich, if you know what I mean, with an active aircraft on the top and an airbase and an active aircraft on the bottom. But again, that's just a preference thing.
Sure. I mean, what I usually do is the inactive aircraft I move to the side. I mean, I usually put them
that's how I would play on a board.
And that simply because when it comes to the refit phase next turn, one it's easily visible which air bases need refits, right?
Yeah. Just as a general note for all viewers, it's really important before you start any game to make sure that you and your opponent discuss stacking habits and Fog of War interpretations, because the rules do have their interpretations and they do have their leniencies, and different players play in different styles, and you wouldn't really want a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of a rule to come up halfway through the game when it's tactically significant. That's the most important thing for me. Generally, I try to do at the start of every game.
Okay, I think I've got everything now. Yeah.
All right, I'll just briefly mark everything is not moved, and what I'll do is I'll go to preferences and I will turn off center on opponent's move so that you can continue to do your Fog of War procedures.
Good point. Very good. I'll do that.
One more Fog of War note I wanted to ask you: do you use your HQs as additional Fog of War, or do you tend to hide your HQs, or do you use a mix of both?
Well, I don't treat HQs any other than other ground units. So
Okay, all right. I sometimes tend to use the special HQ fog of war rule.
what is that? I'm
Uh,
not sure I'm aware of that.
so yeah, it's not super. It's not super oft. It's not used very often, but I use it to whatever benefit I can. I believe under the stacking rules, 4.8 Part D, a HQ can be the top unit in a hex when no enemy units are adjacent. The enemy
Ah,
player must be
okay.
told if the hex has a
I
ZOC.
see.
My
Yeah, I see.
interpretation of that is that you can hide everything under a HQ that's not adjacent to the enemy, and
Mm,
it's the enemy's purview to ask you if there's a zone of control there. That's my interpretation of
right.
that rule.
I think one reason why this rule exists is also, it makes it easier for
To
both players
yeah,
to look at their supply network and
yeah,
throw ranges and
yeah.
stuff like
I,
that.
I I see that as the primary purpose of the rule,
Right.
but I also use it as just again an extra layer of
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy with that.
yeah.
No
So if
problem.
you ever see a HQ, be sure to ask me if there's a zone of control under it. If you see that everything is hidden.
Okay. Okay.
Because I also, especially when playing on Vassal, um, I believe that use of masking in Fog of War has its own complexity to it that doesn't necessarily exist on board play. Because not only can you mask units, you can deliberately not mask units.
Exactly.
And there
Yeah.
are situations where not masking a unit and allowing your opponent to see it might be part of your psychological strategy. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I'll
So
quick.
maybe while we're on the topic, one thing that I would also do is is when placing a supply point, say there's a supply point in a hex, I would maybe not put a single counter in
No,
this
no,
hex, but
that's
maybe
yeah, yeah.
two T counters. But I wouldn't completely overdo it. I wouldn't have 1 T counters in a hex.
On
But
on that
to
on that
increase the
note,
stack side a little bit, I think is fine.
I I only when it comes to supply points, I only believe that there is one legitimate reason to keep them split up rather than make change, and that is
Okay.
when you're differentiating between already moved supply and unmoved supply.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the end of a turn, after cleanup, when those rules no longer apply, or after a phase or whatever,
Yeah.
you will try to consolidate them into as economical a stack as possible.
Okay.
I generally in the games that we play, we tend not to use any kind of change making as any kind of additional fog of war.
Okay. I'm fine
Uh,
with this.
I don't play with zero step loss markers.
Oh,
I understand that that is a
I think that's very important, to be honest. I mean, if you don't, then you always know whether a rifle division or an infantry division is full strength or not. If you use zero step loss markers, it's always a question.
I agree, and I believe that they are not broken or anything like that. I don't think there's necessarily inherently a problem with them, but I try to keep my vassal play as close to my board play as possible um, within the
Yeah,
bounds
but
of reason. And
yeah.
since those zeros don't actually come with OCS nor are covered in the
Oh,
rule set,
I see. Okay.
I I tend to try to keep them out, simply because it's more of an optional rule that you have to agree to, so to speak.
So do you agree to me using zero step loss markers?
If this was Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, I would say yes, simply because we would each have a lot of multi-step formations on both sides, so it would be both sides could make fair use of it. But because in the first 3 turns of this game, I'm basically not going to have any multi-step formations that are of any functional use on the front line. They won't get there in time. I would say that for the purposes of this walkthrough being for both on the board players and vassal players, and with as minimal a difference from the original rule set as possible, we should probably go without this time around.
All right, fine. I'm fine with that.
No problem. All right,
Okay.
let me start with my setup. Now, the German setup is relatively simple. I mean, the physical setup with the aircraft is very quick. So I'm just going to start with the scenario special rules. Um, Most importantly, these ones about the 12 German panzer divisions. Again, I'm going to cover in a bit more detail why this rule is here, its historical context, but for now I'm only going to be executing the rule. There are 12 German panzer divisions and motorized. Pull their formations in a cup and randomly pick 4 that must shift 3 hexes west of their listed location following the road. Let's start with that. So in Vassal, the functionality for this is quite easy. You can simply just go to German offboard box, as you'll see in the overview video for this game, and you've got to set up division draw pile right here. So I will draw the 4 that need to shift 3 left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's deal with those now. So the first one is 29th Motorized Division. Not a big loss because it doesn't start at the front line anyway. So that one's going to go 1, 2, 3. Alright, next one is 4th Panzer Division. And that is going to be over here. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Just like that. Next one is SS Das Reich. And it's going to go 1, 2, 3 underneath this HQ. And the last one is 20th Panzer Division up in the north, starting over here. 1, 2, 3. Again, not a big loss. And now let's pull out our next 4. Important note, it has to be 4 others. Important use of language here. 4 others. You can't go putting these counters back into the division draw pile. It has to be 4 others. So let's draw those 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what are these for? They have to have their motorized regiments trade places with the Aufklärung battalion that starts in the dead pile. Did I get that right this time? Close enough.
Very close.
Close
Very
enough.
close. Aufklärungsbattalion.
Ah, it's an E. Aufklärung.
Yep.
There we go. Alright. So starting with the 20th motorized up here, we will take... Now this is a bit of a loss. Because the 20th motorized contains the infantry assets that will be contributing to any kind of operation in Vitebsk. So losing those is a significant loss of raw combat power. Up next is 18th. This is not so big of a deal, as this is a formation that will most likely be doing maneuver, not direct combat. So I'm not super concerned about it. Again, let's pull up the dead pile and execute that. So the armored recon goes in, infantry regiment goes out. Up next is the 7th, up here in the north. Again, this is a loss, because it is, although these infantry formations could reach Vitebsk in exploitation, they're not as close as the 20th motorized, although it is a loss, because Vitebsk is one of the major urban fights you're going to have at the start of the game. Let's see, right, so we take out the infantry and bring in the armored recon. Last but not least is 17th Panzer. This again is not as big as a loss, because it's most likely going to be doing maneuver. So let's see here. Bring that in, bring that out, and that's done. Cool. So now we've satisfied the requirements of the scenario special rules. Divisions have been moved back and have had their units shuffled around a little bit. I can do my setup, which simply just involves aircraft. There is no reason for me to change the modes of any of my units. I'm starting first. There is one thing I can do, the same thing that Heinrich did. I can start my transport units full, the ones that start with supply, which I will take advantage of, as every little movement point counts in the logistical networks of this game. So let's just go find all of any relevant transport points that might be able to carry things. I think that may be it. Really, just those wagon points around the map. I don't think there's anything else that can pick anything up right now. Cool, let's set up our aircraft and then we'll do our fog of war last but not least. German setup, here we go. Right. Now, it's important to understand that these set up inactive. What that means is that I can't just go set up to the active stacking limit on all these air bases on the map, use them, and then deactivate them off map. That would be great, but unfortunately it would be far too gamey. So I can only really set up on these air bases up to and including the limit of which I could reactivate them with level 1 airbase, that's being 2. So I will begin with... see, I don't necessarily want to leave these air bases or my supply lines undefended because the Soviet player is capable of rear-line air attacks. As a matter of fact, he's more capable of rear-line air attacks than he really is of frontline ones because the facility table leans towards that. So I do want to have fighter cover at each airbase, something long range that can sweep as far into the Russian lines as possible. So I'll start with a Bf-109F at this airbase with a Ju-87B. That Bf-109F will be just for protection, but I'm going to put 2 Bf-109Fs at Bobroysk with 2 Ju-87Bs, so I can have one Bf-109 for protection and one can do a sweep as necessary, although I do not see it being super necessary. Anything I knock out can be refit by the by the Russian player anyway, so it's not super relevant. I'm more focused on protecting my own lines, because ultimately a train busting marker in the wrong place can be quite the bothersome nuisance in this game, and train busting markers slash interdiction markers, depending on what name you like better, are really one of the only effective tools in the air toolbox of the Russian player. It's very difficult to pull anything else off of significance in this game. Alright, cool. So now that we've done that, I'm going to be taking all of the rest of these units and I'm going to be putting them in the German airfields off map. So that's pretty simple. Just straight into the inactive section, including the important Ju-52s, which will be shipping supplies to the map for me. Last but not least is my Fog of War. I'm not going to be going too intense into the Fog of War in this opening turn, simply because all of these units are slated to move. So I'll just hide everything except a zone of control emitting units on all of my divisions. I will be using the HQ rule on this stack.
Ari, I have finished masking all my units. If you want to re-enable center on stack, that's
I will do that as soon as I start my turn. I'll just go through and... Now, on a note on masking, it might seem a little confusing as to why am I going through the trouble of masking all these units now when it's not even that important. Well, a word of advice from me is that I think it's quite important to get into the habit of simply trying to follow reality as closely as possible at all times with your Fog of War, because a lot of players take it quite seriously. They want the rules to be followed as closely as possible, and if you get into a habit of just always knowing what you can and can't hide, and always making a note of acting on it, just using your Control M, as you can see I'm doing it relatively quickly. It's just a good habit to get into. It will allow you to make less mistakes in the future and protect your rights. I believe the Fog of War is an important player right in this game, and it's more like a legal right, full of interpretations, and you need to protect yourself by being as studious and judicious as possible with it. Alright, almost done here. And same with the air bases. Air bases are pretty simple with the Fog of War. Just keep an active fighter on the top. If not, it can be anything else. Cool. Now, airfields, the Russian player can see my airfields. I just make a note of hiding everything there. Off-map boxes are usually well interpreted to understand that everything in a player's off-map box can be hidden at all times. That includes the Russian players' boxes, the northern edge box and the southern edge box, the rules that I play with in this game, and generally the way that the OCS 4.3 rules tend to cover off-map boxes usually tends to make them pretty invisible to the opposing player. Right, with that being done, I think I'm more or less ready to start my turn. Is there anything you think we might be forgetting, Heinrich?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to go.
Alright, cool. So I am the starting player. I will spend probably the next 45 minutes doing my turn. Now, as a note, it's perfectly okay if you are playing this game for the first time for this opening turn to take you 4 hours, or 6 hours, or 8 hours, or several days. It's pretty hefty. I have done this opening turn about 30 times now, so I'm a bit more familiar with it, and for the pleasure of the viewer, I can do it a lot quicker, so we can get through to the end of the video. But I will describe everything that I'm doing. Now, obviously, there is a significant amount of fog of war on the Russian side. We're both using fog of war. I will be using partly what I know, partly what I should be able to know. But if I shouldn't be able to know something, especially based on me switching to the solo side while Heinrich does his moves, I won't be using that information as a matter of course. But just to give you an example, in this setup, as an experienced player, I'm going to know what's a step loss, what isn't, simply just because of the setup. So that's intelligence at all times that you can always use, but anything else is not. So just keep that in mind. It's just a nature of the beast when playing OCS that especially the first turn is pretty easy to optimize, although we do have the wiggle rule to help reduce that to a certain extent. But over so many different iterations, you can see how many times the wiggle rule can be used to various effect. So let's just go ahead with the turn. First things first, we're going to be skipping weather determination as it's already been determined for us. I believe if we go, yep, normal flight on 8th of July, that's correct. First blade determination is irrelevant on the first turn. It's dictated to us. I'm the first player. Now we're going to do aircraft refit. This one's pretty quick. German airfields, all I need to do is just go over here and move all these guys over here. I'm just going to unmask them to make it simple because I'm going to be using them on the map for the most part, so there's no reason to keep them hidden at this time. And, well, I did not start these guys on the airbase as inactive, but they are inactive, so I will pay for their activation. There we go, 1T per airbase. Those 2 airbases are now active. Right, it's aircraft refit done. Reinforcement, if my memory serves me correct, the Germans will be receiving no reinforcements on the 8th of July. And that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Access rail cap is 0. At least I don't have to worry about it. No hedgehogs above level 1. Begin security needs, which just means I need to garrison my cities or keep a zone of control over them. And Guderian and Hoth. Now, if you've watched the companion video to this, reading over the rules and doing an overview of the Smolensk game, you'll know what Guderian and Hoth is, so I'm not going to go too deep into it right now. But obviously, as you know, I've got basically 2 halves to my units and a line that I cannot cross beginning at Orsha. So when playing this game, I tend to use that line also as a representative of how I plan my units. So I think I'm going to start at the bottom of the map, which is usually where I tend to begin. Now, what's going through my head is usually what goes through my head anytime I play OCS, regardless of scenario in game. You want to plan your turn out on multiple levels. You want to be planning it out on a scenario-wide level in the context of where you want to be in relation to where your objectives are. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into where those objectives are. Obviously, you know where Smolensk is, and you can vaguely see where these victory hexes are. I will not be reaching them in this 3-turn exhibition game, but I do want to make my way along the roads towards the Russian rear lines in a general sense. It is perfectly natural to have your targets selected at the start of this game, but it's perfectly valid not to. Experienced players can do both. An experienced player may have an exact idea as to which objectives he wants to reach to win the game and how he wishes to do it if it's a geographic objective-based scenario. Or he may want to start poking sticks at the line, seeing what lines break first, seeing what opportunities open up, and dynamically change his choices of objectives as it goes along. My rule of thumb for this opening turn is I don't tend to select which objectives I'm going for immediately. I tend to just see how the dice roll. I tend to try to conserve my resources, try to see what holes I can open up, and go from there. So that's the sort of scenario-wide way I sort of think about this.
Can I add something here?
Sure.
I think part of this is also that you're at the beginning of your movement phase. You might want to gather intelligence about stack sizes, for example. And you would get this intelligence, for example, by performing hip shoots,
Mm.
and then based, and so you get a better understanding of what you're facing, and that can inform your decisions about where to attack and where not to attack, for example. So that
Yeah.
plays into this, that you form your plan while you're starting your movement phase.
Yeah. I I don't often do that myself personally. I To get into the next stage of how I plan my turns. That's the scenario description. But then obviously you need to plan your turns based on the turn itself. And by that I mean figure out where you want to be at the end of the turn. And so to give you an idea of, vaguely speaking, where I want to be at the end of this turn, before I start talking about that, I want to give some general strategy opinions. The Axis player, especially if he's hoping to satisfy the August 19th victory conditions, needs to be conservative with his losses and cannot be seeking to attack at every opportunity, even if there are many opportunities to attack across the map that may be advantageous to you. The dice are cruel. They will take losses from you even if you make every attack optimized and every attack perfect. My policy when it comes to combat is do it as absolutely necessary in contribution to your goals. Do not do it if you see an opportunity to get kills. Do not do it if you see a great combat you can possibly do that's not really in the way of your objectives. There is very little material gain. The Soviets, the Russians, they will have a much greater replacement rate than you, and up until August 19th, they will simply get replacements for free. They will be getting huge amounts of reinforcements for free. It's just, you are not going to win the match by killing a huge amount of Russian units, unless you're lucky, unless you're playing up against a certain player, unless you're playing against certain strategies. In a general sense, my opinion is that against most optimized Russian strategies, you're not going to be able to bleed them dry, right? So my first point of order is to be very careful where I choose to do my combats. I will do combat, but I will make sure that it is in the interest of advancing exactly where I want to go, and that is obviously east, but not east everywhere. Okay, the whole idea here is you definitely don't want to advance on every front, on every road at all times. It's very costly, and it's a misallocation of resources. You want to be in basically you want to be advancing rapidly in 2 to 3 sections of the front along a main highway at all times if possible, right? 2 to 3. 2 at a minimum, 3 if you're lucky, right? And those 2 could be on the Vitebsk-Smolensk axis. It could be on the Mogilev, or it could be basically on the Korshev-Smolensk axis. If somehow you've managed it, it could be on the Orsha-Smolensk axis, right through the middle. That would be a bit rough and difficult, right? It doesn't have to be on a main highway, but you want to be advancing in one direction. You want to be dedicating almost all your resources there to either there or to covering their supply lines and making sure that they don't get cut off, and that's it. Not going off willy-nilly, covering every angle, trying to get kills.
Hmm. Again, I'd like to add something, if I may. I mean, you very rightly point out that as a German player, you have to be conservative with which combats you choose to engage in. But I think that mainly applies to being conservative with your supply points. I do think the German player has to be willing to accept quite a few step losses to achieve his aims.
Oh, there's unavoidable losses, but what I more mean is if you create a large opportunity and if you're in movement, there will always be opportunities to take up quite a great deal of combats,
Mm-hmm.
which could all
Yeah.
actually go quite positively. But not only is that obviously a misallocation of supply points, but the losses that you will incur you know, I guess the point is that the losses that you incur already in the process of achieving your direct objectives and advancing as quickly as possible are dear. There is no way to avoid them. There will be
Well,
times
I mean,
you do have to take
I agree. I
options.
mean, what that means is, in terms of combat results, you will take many option results as step losses
Correct.
as the German player,
And
to take the hex or to break through or whatever, right?
yeah, it's totally
So
acceptable to
you're
do
not
that.
trying to conserve your units in that sense.
No, it's not like that. It's not that you won't take losses, but it's that
Yeah,
every combat will present the opportunity to take losses. And if you
right.
end up taking losses in order to inflict damage in places that don't directly advance your aims, like
Yeah,
they do not directly point you forward like an arrow, then yeah, you will sorely miss those steps later down the line. Um,
agreed.
another another point on that note is you do want to try to build, you want to have a steady stockpile of supplies behind you. If you're playing each turn going down to zero on the supplies, that will come with many negative consequences. Soviet players can and will counterattack, and they are incentivized to counterattack, and they can produce quite powerful counterattacks if they catch you flat footed. So, at a bare minimum, having the supplies to make sure that that doesn't set you off operationally is important. But it's also important as you never know when the killing moment will come up in this game. There will be several of them where basically the Soviet player will be caught flat-footed. There will be an opportunity to exploit, but you will not be able to successfully exploit that opportunity unless you have the resources to do it. And the worst feeling is to see those opportunities open up above you, knowing that if you just had the fuel and the combat strength and possibly even the barrage ability to crack that nut, you could do it, but you have to forego it. All because you wanted to move that extra division a couple of turns early that ended up doing nothing. You wanted to do those combats a few turns early to clean up some units rather than let them die on the vine. It adds up over time. So you want to keep those stockpiles behind you. So as I play this first turn, you're going to notice that I am careful with how I spend my supply. There may be certain divisions that I do not move at all, for that matter, although I will be fueling a significant amount of them. But I may end up foregoing certain axes entirely if I believe that the strategic value of attacking and occupying them is just not worth it, as opposed to keeping a stable stock of supply. So on that note, when I talk about your game turn specific goals, you want to figure out where you want to be at the end of the turn, and then you want to break that down into three parts. So let's start by figuring out where I want to be at the end of this turn. Ideally, I'd like to be, as we go along the river line here. So in a very general sense, I want to be crossing rivers, especially the Dnieper and the Dvina, right? I don't stand much of a chance of actually getting across the major rivers simply in this first turn. That's very difficult to do. But if I can capture the key crossing points, that is Bykhov and Mogilev, for that matter, and having a significant amount of units on the frontage of the river so that bridge markers can be placed down if necessary, perhaps even having HQs moving up to the river so that they can bridge the river as well as necessary, because I do not count on capturing Mogilev. I've had successful games where Mogilev wasn't captured in the first turn. You can't Capturing Mogilev is important, but you need to have contingency plans for if the dice don't roll your way. You need to have units up against the river ready to circumnavigate it if necessary. So yeah, Bykov is where I would like to be. Mogilev is where I would like to be. Now, this is a strategic decision I've been making in many of my games recently, but I tend not to engage significantly on the Orsha axis. It is it's very difficult and dangerous to encircle Orsha. It requires a significant dedication of resources. It will occupy a large amount of units, and it will occupy a great deal of fuel, and it will cost you a lot of supply, and it's units that the Russian player may keep in Orsha anyway.
Hmm.
And if you're unsuccessful in surrounding them, which is a probability, unless you dedicate enough resources, they can pull the units out anyway, and you will have spent those resources for naught. So as a strategic decision, I usually choose not to engage at Orsha. There isn't the first motorized division is a juicy target, and if you do anything at all, you could justify positioning units simply just to bust that hex and do damage to it. But as I can see here, I wasn't following too closely in the setup deliberately so that I don't actually know what's going on with the Fog of War situation here. But at least as far as I can surmise, a great deal of the first motorized is still intact in its original hex, which is a great deal of combat power. It would take a lot mathematically to deal with that. With Fog of War being enabled, you're never going to be able to get down to numbers and do the math exactly in every combat that you do. But you can do the math and you can calculate average combat power per hex that the Russian player is generally going to have, and you can half that, and you can say that generally speaking, in any given hex, depending on how many steps that you can actually see based on the Fog of War, you might be looking at anywhere between 10 to 20 combat strength raw. If you DG it, it could be 5 to 10. And then when it comes to the combat, you want to be giving yourself a certain average of action rating differential, and you want to be putting yourself 2 to 3 to 1 above whatever you've got in your head. That's the best you can do when Fog of War is around.
Maybe one little addition about Orsha. The reason why the Soviet player is incentivized to hold Orsha for a longer time is that it sits on this double track rail line that goes directly to Smolensk. I think that's a rail line that is very
Yeah,
important to the German player in later stages of the game. So if you want to put up a roadblock or a
yeah,
fortress, then that's not a
yeah.
bad place to
It's
be.
as a German player, I tend to accept that strategy as an inevitability.
Mm,
I tend to find that the smartest allocation of resources is to keep a light touch at Orsha, cut it off on the double track railway line over here as quickly as
right,
possible.
coming from the north, yeah.
Whatever happens before then, you can't do much about. Naturally, the Russian player will ship in supply to the best of his ability, and he may ship in even additional HQs, or not additional HQs, but he will have a HQ in there to take advantage of the supply caches in this
Supply
game.
cache rule,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yeah.
So it is very well possible that these units in Orsha can survive up to 3 or 4 or even 5 turns after they are cut off from tray supply.
Hmm.
Again, it's not very critical because by the time, or at least in my opinion, it's not critical because by the time the rail repair units arrive, furthermore, by the time they arrive and even reach the vicinity of Orsha, you should have whittled down the Russian forces to the point where it is at least economical to do some combat on the very last remnants of them,
Yeah.
depending on how lucky you have been with the out of supply rolls killing action rating units of sorts.
Yes, I have a very similar approach when I'm playing the German side. I mean, I tend to leave Orsha alone until I could convert the rail line through Orsha in the next turn, right? I mean, then I would say, okay, now I need to take this finally,
Mm,
so as to not lose any time with rail conversion. But that,
right.
as you say, the rail repair units, they come in only after 3 or 4 turns anyway, and then they need to first convert the rail line from the map edge to Orsha anyway.
Right. So then that puts more importance for me on the army on the Panzer Group 2 with Hoth in the north, or Panzer Group 3, I think it is. Um,
Yeah.
Getting past Vitebsk and getting down to the Orsha Smolensk railway line as quickly as possible, as they are going to be the ones cutting that off ideally. So I will try to basically make that their job. I don't try to capture Vitebsk as soon as possible. I usually just try to capture the southern city hex if possible, if not even just
Hmm.
get around it. I There is a mistake, I believe, in abandoning the Dvina River. You need to. I will be making an effort to capture this hex. It's quite important. You don't want to let the Russian player secure his western flank against Vitebsk. You want. Um, Obviously, it's hard for me to say right now with my opponent listening whether my strategy will include attacking Vitebsk north directly, but I often find as a German player it is sufficient enough to have the existence of the threat of force around these swamps, around Gorodok, so that essentially the Russian player is forced to evacuate from Vitebsk. in a sense. But it's a touchy nut to crack. It's
Hmm.
the main thing that you want to prevent is something that I've used in a previous game, where the if you completely leave northern Vitebsk and you leave the river alone and you don't try to threaten it, you allow that entry point for the Russians to be used potentially to turn northern Smolensk into a bit of a festoon against attack. And there are strategies that involve trying to keep Vitebsk all the way up until August 19th. So very, very
Well,
absurd, very most likely not to happen, but you want to just make sure that you're not allowing the possibility of such.
that's interesting. I mean, I've always taken a different position about this. As a German player, I tend to completely ignore. I mean, okay, I should not say ignore. I try to take the northern city hex of Vitebsk. One of the reasons for this is it has an air base that I'd like to use for my fighters. And the second consideration, of course, is that the entry hex, what is it up here? L, I believe it is.
Yeah.
That is ceasing as a supply, so ceasing to be a supply source for the Soviet player after a couple of turns. So my point of view usually is, as a German player, these Russian units will go away anyway,
Yeah, they will go
right?
away, but what I'm trying to say is that if you completely abandon the river line and fall back and focus on a push south of the Dvina River,
Right.
for the time that that supply source is open and that it's available to move units in and out by the Russian player, it's
Yeah.
entirely possible for them to ship quite a great deal of supply and action ratings into Vitebsk City if you don't try to challenge it, and
Right. That's why I'm
that would
trying to
be a
take
pain in
it.
the
Yeah.
butt.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the only difference in my opinion is that rather than trying to take Vitebsk, I usually just try to put the threat,
Hmm. Sure.
put the threat mate there, and see if I can uh, initiate a retreat. Um, so anyhow, I haven't gone through my reinforcement phase yet, although I have checked for new units. I don't get any new units. I do have a supply table and a random events table, so I will go roll for everything now. Um, right, Axis supply replacement rolls. Let's start with. We'll do the Axis supply table, then we'll do Axis replacements, then we'll do special replacements, and then we will do variable rolls. So let's start with the supply table roll. Very nice.
Wow.
That's what we like to see.
Well, you, not me.
Yeah. So it's 11, and that has to be split with the odd supply point going to Guderian, which means that Control G, 5 goes to Hoth at entry K, and 6 goes to Guderian. And I think I'll do. See, now supply placement by the book, you need to do it now. Well, in a lot of our games, we don't necessarily place it immediately. We might mold it into the movement phase, but for the sake of demonstration, I will stick to the book and I will regret any misplacement later. But again, this is why I'm trying to determine what I'm trying to do now. And then the whole point of saying that I'm not going to strike heavily at Orsha at least allows me to go, hey, I'm not going to dedicate any additional supply resources there. So I will dedicate most of this 6 supply points, say 5 supply points, to the well, that's the thing as well. There's a transportation over here, but not much of it. Um, put 4 here, and we will put 2 here. And let's just hope that that proves to be okay. So back to the replacement table. Let's take a roll on it. It's a 5, which is nothing. Special replacements. It's a 5, which is a Aufklaren or
Aufklärung.
Claron, right? Or uh, Kradschützen.
Oh, Gradschützen, ja.
I
So
used to,
Grad is an abbreviation for Kraftrad,
I used to think it meant
right?
Kettenrad, but
Is it?
no,
You might be right. I
no,
actually don't
no.
know.
I remember that being a mistake. I believe it is something Schutzen that I've already forgotten immediately after saying it. But now I get to rebuild those on a HQ. I believe it's not. It doesn't come as part of a regular reinforcement. I'll just double check
Hmm.
that. Double
Yeah, I think
checking
you're right.
things is something that you'll be doing very often in any game. Specials return any HQ. Got it. Cool. So let's go to my dead pile. Now again, the placement of this is pretty important as I want it to coincide with where I want to do the most damage. So I'm thinking that's probably going to be here in the south. So I will rebuild it on the 24th Panzer Corps, and it will be, let's see, yeah, let's rebuild the 4th Panzer's unit here. There we go. So we can have something a bit beefier. And now for variable roles.
No,
No,
I
not
don't
yet. You're
think
right. That's right. It
they
just
start in
struck me.
July.
Yeah,
Mm.
it starts on the 19th of July, which I believe is out of the scope of this game. So let's not even talk about random events, shall we? Let's
Sure.
cool. Cool. That's my replacements, and now I'm just going to go ahead with my movement. Now, okay. So now we are going to proceed ahead with the movement phase. But to take it back to that planning thing I was talking about before, you want to plan out from a scenario perspective, you want to plan out from a turn perspective, and once you've planned out from a turn perspective, and I haven't actually finished doing that yet, where we're going for Bykov, going for Mogilev, and as I was saying, I'm going to kind of strategically avoid Orsha, and I'm going to be putting as much resources as possible into cracking Vitebsk, getting it past it, getting over the western Dvina River here, towards Rudnaya, as close as possible to it, on the road to Smolensk and Demidov. That's really my goals here. Now, with those goals defined, I like to tell players to split your procedure into 3 parts. And these 3 parts correspond with the OCS turn summary, right, or the OCS turn in general. The first part is your movement phase, the second part revolves around the combat phase, the third part revolves around exploitation, because these are the 3 main parts that you're going to be using for success in OCS, right? So what I'm trying to say with that is, the way I read it is, movement phase is for clearing obstacles, right? And I don't mean big obstacles. The movement phase for me exists to get rid of things that are small enough and weak enough to be cleared with relatively safe overruns. And usually just overruns, because that's what you do in the movement phase, right? So what you're doing is you're clearing a path towards your primary targets, or you're clearing a path towards bigger obstacles that obscure your primary targets, right? So in the case of the south here, that would involve clearing these guys out, these guys out, these guys out. Possibly not these guys, as they can't really be overrun due to the hex that they occupy. But we'll come up with an additional plan for them. In the case of Orsha, at the very least, we want to make a threat to Orsha. So that would involve simply clearing these guys, and these guys, which is a relatively simple enterprise. Let's see.
Another interruption, if I may.
Yep.
I mean, what you're saying about how the different phases are used and how you use the movement phase to get obstacles out of the way. I just want to add that this is, of course, a very German-centric view. I mean, for the Soviet player, the different phases of the turn can't use in the same manner.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, the Soviets will not
Yeah.
overrun; they cannot hit shoot.
Yeah.
For them, the combat phase is much more important than artillery,
Yeah.
etc. Just to
Absolutely.
throw, I would just want to throw this in there.
Everything I'm saying is from a German perspective, and essentially what I am describing is Schwerpunkt. Is that how you say it? Schwerpunkt?
Very good,
Yeah.
Schwerpunkt. Very good,
Yeah,
very good.
ideology, where what I'm talking about now is clearing obstacles. And what are we clearing the obstacles for? We are clearing the obstacles for the Schwerpunkt, which is I'm not sure how to exactly translate it into English, but the heavy point.
Yeah, point of main focus,
Point of
maybe.
focus, that's right. You want to identify those linchpins of enemy defense, and you want to mathematically give yourself the greatest possible odds of punching through there. And that's where the combat phase comes in, step 2, right? And then step 3 is naturally, as the name suggests, exploiting that. Now, that does not have to be in that linear fashion. you might find that both the movement and combat come down to clearing obstacles, because exploitation is a turn within a turn, depending on the resources that you allocate for it. So you may see times where not only are you using the movement to clear obstacles, but you're also using your combat phase to clear additional obstacles that are just too dangerous to overrun. You need to do a prepared attack. And then you're using the exploitation to crack that nut at the end, to get the prize that you're looking for. And although you may not be able to exploit the exploit and move past it, if it's a particularly dangerous objective behind several defensive layers, that may be the procedure that you have to undertake. It's very situational, but in terms of what I'm looking to clear in the movement phase, it would be very little up north, because there's very little here that is truly safe enough, in my opinion, to overrun with any degree of success. Now, I'm not saying you can't overrun it, I'm not saying that's a bad strategy, but I find that in order to guarantee success in overruns against these fortified positions, you're going to have to dedicate more resources than is really justified, and you don't leave yourself much else to work with. Don't forget that in this first turn, all you really have are these multi-unit formations. You don't have very much else. So there's not much to cover their lines with. So these divisions have to simultaneously cover their own lines, and especially use terrain to that effect, and surround the enemy and damage the enemy and get past the enemy all at the same time without material support from infantry, independent units, anything like that. So you need to be careful. Um, so starting back at the bottom again, those are the obstacles that we're wanting to clear. Step 2 with the combat are going to be the things that either are a secondary obstacle or are the targets themselves. So this is a secondary obstacle, something that I can't really overrun. I could combat it. I also don't have to combat it. It's entirely possible to cross the river here without obstacle, although it will cost a degree of movement points, and I will have to cover the zone of control. So whether I want to combat this guy and move in the exploitation, or whether I want to find another way around him, that's another question. But after these guys have been cleared in the movement phase, this will be a target in the combat phase. This will be a target in the combat phase. Depending on the level of success and depending on what might get opened there will be units available in exploitation to take advantage of that. However, that's neither here nor there. We will get to that. There's not going to be any kind of combat or exploitation follow-up targets, I think, around Orsha at this time, simply because I want to save on the resources there. And so, without there being too many movement phase targets up here in Vitebsk, I'm going to be wanting to focus my clearing operations of sorts in the combat phase, and possibly taking advantage of the exploitation phase to move past Vitebsk up to the river and possibly over it. We shall see. Let's start in the south. I'm just going to start moving things around. I won't be explaining every little move I make in detail. It's not a tutorial on how to move units or anything like that. I'll just be giving a general commentary on what units I'm moving and why. So let's start with obstacle clearing.
Before you do that, I have another thing to say.
Yep.
It's just you mentioned that the exploitation phase is a turn within a turn, which I think is a very apt expression. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understands why that is the case. The exploitation phase has its own movement segment, barrage segment, and combat segment. So in a way, it mirrors the overall turn structure. That's why it's a turn within a turn. That's just wanted to make that clear.
It allows you to essentially rerun operations with resources that you've reserved for that explicit purpose,
Right.
which sometimes might be relevant, sometimes might not be. But the first obstacle presented here is this one. Now, this is an obstacle that may or may not need to be cleared. There's a few different bridges here, a few different ways to cut this shape. Again, for these two units over here, they're basically primary obstacles. They're not going anywhere without clearing one or both of these units. However, for these units down here, they are freely able to move up there and engage and clear the road. So do I want to engage these units? Not really. It's not necessarily a smart allocation of resources. Why? Because by clearing this unit, both of these units can move forward, and these guys can simply die on the vine. I just need to make sure that any possible... trying to figure out a word that's not an expletive. Messing around. Any possible messing around by these units is contained if I'm going to simply let them die on the vine. Furthermore, I need to blanket the zone of control around Bykov to allow myself to conduct operations north of there. And further to that, I need to make sure that anything that I'm doing is covered by my supply. Um, Now, what unit am I actually going to use for this purpose? We've got these 4 strength, 1 action rating tank division remnants here that in most cases should be pretty easy to clear almost with a singular unit. And I think the unit I want to use for that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 plus 3 is 13, 14, 15. Okay, it's not going to be able to do it exactly. Alright. Notice that I'm changing units modes just as a way of observing what their capabilities are. It's not permanent. 16, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, okay, so there's a armored recon unit. No, there's not. There's a Kradschützen unit in here that is capable of doing what I'm wanting it to do. But it's important to note that the armoured divisions are also just as good at this job. Well, they're going to be a lot better at this job. And you'd think to yourself, well, hold on, I want to save those armoured units for the main attack. Mogilev, Bykov, not super friendly to armoured attack, put simply. I mean, you can throw them in there as necessary, but they are going to be halved. So my main intention would be to bring infantry strength down to bear on those units, because at least it won't be halved, though it would be very difficult to get infantry. 1, 2, yeah, very difficult to get full strength combat mode infantry formations adjacent to Mogilev in this turn. Pretty much impossible. But let's just start with obstacle clearing. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9.5. Okay. Let's blanket this zone of control with our infantry. 1, 2. I'm going to unmask it again. I just get into the habit of unmasking units as I move them. Alright, that zone of control is blanketed. I will... First thing I will do with this truck underneath the 10th Motorized Division is I will use it to fuel the whole division. And then I will send it to the edge of the map. I'm doing this quite quickly because I know that all of this is in the scope of what it can do without stopping, and it's got 45 movement range. So he goes there, picks one up, comes back, and stops here, within easy access of the units involved. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. Trace supply is also something you need to keep in mind quite significantly when moving units behind enemy lines, because you don't want your plans to fail and then suddenly units that you thought would be in trace supply suddenly aren't. So let's start with this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.5, we'll say for now. And we're going to do an overrun against this unit. I've paid off my truck. And again, you're going to find that I'm not going to be going through the combat procedure in a tutorial level detail, neither will Heinrich. We are trying to get through this, so we're going to be going through combat as experienced players combat would go through it. Heinrich, you know my action rating unit, you know my combat strength, you know...
Well, first we need to pay for supply, don't we?
Yeah, you can choose to pay for it or not, but you already know all the information here. Action
Yeah,
rating
I will.
odds.
I will pay.
Okay, cool. Right, so I'm taking a little bit of a risk here, but at a 4+ action rating differential, I consider it justified. 1 to 2.
Sorry, did you are
Yeah,
you
I've
attacking
paid.
with internals?
No, I've paid. I have a trucking unit here.
Ah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yes, you said that. Yeah, fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I am attacking this unit. It's going to be starting at 1 to 2 with an action rating differential of 4. I'll roll for surprise. Oh, man.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, that just goes to show the kind of luck you can get in this game. I'm going to roll 1 dice if that's alright with you.
Sure.
Alright, so starting in the 1 to 5, I'm going to roll 2 dice and add 4. It's a 9. Oh, off to a good start. Nothing like a good snake eyes to get things going. Alright, so I'm off to the dead pile, which means this time around I'm going to play it a bit safer.
So the actual, maybe we should just name the combat result. So that was on the 1 to 5 and 5 plus 4, 1, 9. So it's AL101, DO1. But because you cannot satisfy as the attacker your option result because you only have a single unit, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to react to my
Now,
option result.
also another note, why did I attack with that unit in particular? First, because it's expendable. You get them back for free. Alright. So thank God I didn't do that with the Panzer unit initially. Which is what I might end up doing next. Because it'll be times 2, 6, 4, 1, 1 to 5. Yep. I think I will fuel up the 3rd Panzer Division and use the same method I did before, where the truck takes the fuel and then it goes back, takes fuel from the edge of the map, fills itself back up, and you know what, let's just put it in the same place as the other one. We're going to move our Panzer formation up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5, right. So combat again. I've paid.
I'm going to pay now.
Yep, so I'm 3 times
Okay,
2 is 6. 6 divided by 4, 1.5. 1.5 rounds up to 2, which sits on 2 to 1 in open terrain column, plus 4 to my AR differential. Rolling for surprise, plus 4. Okay, this time we get it.
Yep.
This time it's plus 3. Like 2, 3. So we've got 5 to 1 on open terrain, rolling 2 dice, adding 4. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. So that's. I'm not even going to bother reading the result. And this is demonstrative. In situations like this, so long as you, as the attacker, are not taking a result, and the defender only has 1 unit defending, it's pretty simple. It just goes to the dead pile. So do you want to send to the dead pile?
Yep,
cool.
did it.
So that's plus 3. I'm just going to trace back to where it started from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5, 5.5 plus 3 is 8.5. So we're just going to go 9.5, 10.5. Yeah, we're just going to use the same unit for the sake of economy. So this is 8.5, 9.5, 10.5. And we're going to use another T. And we're going to repeat the combat. And we know that we're the exact same odds, exact same situation. I've paid. Are you paying?
I'm paying, but I'm actually paying from a different
no problem.
From this one.
No problem at all. 4 plus differential, rolling for surprise. Yep, got it. It's 2 this time around, so 2 to 1 goes to 4 to 1. Rolling for combat. Okay, I'm not even going to bother reading that. Right, you can send that one to the dead pile.
Yep.
10.5 plus 3 is 13.5. And now I need to decide where I want this unit to end, because he has 2.5 movement points left. Good question. This really comes down to my choice of target, whether I want to do some kind of focused attack at Bykov, or whether I want to have a gambit at Mogilev. There is something called the Mogilev gambit. I have been a victim to it, and I have done it before. Decision of to whether I want to chip away at Mogilev.
So you're thinking about whether you want to move the Panzer unit
adjacent
to serve as a spotter for hip shoots, right?
Correct, because other units can serve that purpose, and now that the road is open, there are several that could do that. And the rest of this unit's formation units that have already moved, such as the infantry regiments, are at Bykov, so whether I want to keep them adjacent to them or send them somewhere else, I'm not entirely sure at this stage. 3.5, which means if we move down there, it'd be 13.5, 14.5, 15, 16... 13.5. Um, 13.5. 14.5, 15, 16. Don't want to send him somewhere useless. But
you could send him here to use as a backstop.
He can't make it quite there because this would be 14.5, 15, 16.
Oh, right, sure.
You know what? I think what I'm going to do is I will move him adjacent to the river. It serves purpose as a spotter, and also it serves purpose if I need it as additional combat power in the combat phase, and it serves purpose as a potential river crossing as well.
Right. Makes sense.
Right, so next moves now. I will conduct a hip shoot against Mogilev,
Mm-hmm.
and I will kind of use it as a litmus test as to whether I want to go ahead with the strategy or not. The question is, where do I take it from? We're not using long-range air effects, so I don't need to take that into my consideration. But at the same time, there's nothing within 10 hexes of Bobroisk that I want to hit at this stage. I don't want to waste it on those infantry divisions. And Bykov is just one hex too far. Fascinating. Well, I guess with the long-range air rules not being in effect, I can simply just use something from the active boxes. 30 to the edge of the map and an additional 14 to Mogilev, so
Yeah, that's fine.
44, which is manageable for Ju-87B. So let's just, you don't have any patrol zones over Mogilev, right?
No, all fighters are inactive.
Alright, cool. Let's start with flak. I assume it's going to be a +1 for the airbase. Any other modifiers?
That's correct. There's no HQ in the hex.
Alright, +1.
Wow, you're really unlucky.
Well, it happens. It's fine. Just getting it out of the way now. Alright, 5 to 7. I'm going to start with my left shifts. 1 for Hedgehog. 1 for very close terrain.
Yeah, and I have 6 regimental equivalents, so that's
Okay, right, 3.
3 rides. Yeah.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3. We rest in the 8 to 11 column. I'll roll for it. No. Well, look, based on the information that I have on that, 6 regimental equivalents. So obviously some breakdown units have been wiggled in. See, the math here is how much of a combat result in either one combat or 2 combats or several combats do I need to execute against this stack? Because, see, the overrun method is fine. It's all well and good. But it's difficult to mass combat power in such a case. So, with so many steps existing in Mogilev, my chances of getting past 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 are low, even with a DG. In which case I'm relying on shifts, which is difficult with the Hedgehog protecting what is most likely a 2 or 3 action rating, most likely in there. So there's a protected 3 action rating. So at
Well,
best,
there is the action rating for NKVD unit in there at start. You have
yeah,
this information.
correct. But that'll die first. So even after
Right,
that, I've got a protected 3 action rating in there. So at
right.
best, my differential is going to be +1 at first. Then it's going to be +2 at best at first. The math
Mm,
there, probabilities, look, this is just my intuition. It's not a good idea, right? Not a good
mm,
idea to
mm,
overrun it incessantly. It would be a better idea, I believe, to combat it and follow up with an exploitation combat in the hope that
mhm,
that cracks it. And
mhm,
then also follow up with multiple potential river crossings and a HQ also prepared to cross the river in combat mode in this phase, so that I'm prepared if the Mogilev attack does not work out.
right.
So with that being said, I'm going to use this IRDG 5 combat strength, which is nothing to sneeze at. 2.5, yeah. Difficult prospect. Truck can't move in. The use of the IRDG is limited. Limited. How do I want to play that? It's a good question, actually. I mean, if it goes 16, 1, 2, 3. I got that, so it's 18. Combat strength. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. I'm thinking it's. Fascinating. I'm thinking it's hard to say. It's hard to justify attacking this 26 tank when I could just cross the river, blanket the. Very
Are
hard.
you thinking of an overrun? No, you can't
No,
overrun,
I'm
right?
not thinking of an overrun. I'm thinking of whether to move to the combat phase with this one.
All right. Okay.
Obviously not right now, but move to the combat
Mm,
phase, take it
mm,
out,
mm.
and then exploit past it. Or whether to blanket the
Right.
zone of control now, cross the river.
Right.
Yeah. Because the combat thing I would probably use the IRGD here.
Mm.
It can stay in its combat mode. It can do a fair bit of damage. And it's got the action rating differential, and I might even try to barrage it just to guarantee that there will most likely be success. But then the IRDG is not being able to used in the attack on Mogilev, and the IRDG, even in combat, in movement mode, have 5 combat strength, which is the highest combat strength of a movement mode infantry unit I'm gonna
There.
get at this stage. And so if taking Mogilev really is my goal, it's kind of where I want to have them involved. Um, and this 10th Panzer Infantry Regiment is not going to get anywhere near adjacent to Mogilev in its combat mode, regardless of what I do, even if I put it into reserve or anything like that. Even if it was in reserve here and exploited, it can only go 1, 2, 3, and I'm not going to be able to crack that infantry division right now.
Mm.
So it's not going to be able to reach here to be able to contribute to the combat in combat mode. So what I'm thinking here is to blanket the zone of control. So I will fuel up the division. I will use... Good question, what will I use? What's that? These are 4 combat strength on a good day. And the TEC, crossing a minor river, +3 to track into forest, or woods, 5, so 0.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7, hold on, 0.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7, 8. Interesting. That's only those guys though. Well, so, right, I'm gonna put, him there, and I'll put him there with the lowest movement allowance, and I
Mm-hmm.
will put these guys 0.5, 5.5, 6.5. I need to think about trace supply here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I think you can still get rays from down here.
Not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Reaches until here.
3, 4, 5. No, but that's not where I want to move further. That's what I'm determining.
Right. Okay.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ah, okay. Well, it's about here would be fine, but no, not really any further. Unless I wish to feed them. And I don't really wish to feed them, but this, so 5.5, 6.5, 7, 8. I might want to rethink this. Yeah, you know what? On second thought,
Mm-hmm.
now this is an interesting point to bring up. Generally speaking, in the games that we play, you can take back moves situationally, not ones that have consequences. But for example, here, Heinrich, if I was to say, right, I'm going to redo my movements of this division, would you have a problem with that?
Not at all. I mean,
Yeah,
OCS is complicated enough. I mean, if we wouldn't allow, corrections on the go, it would be terrible.
yeah.
Perfectly
So,
fine.
but it is situational, and you do need to speak to your opponent about it. And there are situations where such things aren't acceptable because of the consequences that they have on the game. So just always keep that in mind. So I'm going to start these guys fresh, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go for the combat, and I am going to put the whole formation in fuel it and put it in reserve with only a certain number of units in movement mode, just one, while the rest of them will not be. And I will move them underneath here. I don't sense that there is any threat to them, so I can justify overstacking. And that will be that axis. And now Mogilev. All that's really left here on this flank is to judge the mathematics of what attacks I want to do. 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, the 4th Cav units are a little complicated. They are infantry, but for what they are, paying 1T for 2 combat strength is not within the bounds of what I think is economical. So I think I want to dedicate 4th Cav to 1, garrisoning Bobroysk. And then I can send some additional units, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, to make sure that any potential dangerous avenues of attack are covered. Is it a combat unit that needs to be? Let's just take a quick look at
I was
this.
just wondering the same thing. Let me bring up.
Security
Do you have the
needs
Smolensk rules handy?
attack capable unit. So yeah, I can't
Okay, so you
I
can't
can't
leave
leave
the
an artillery
artillery.
unit. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, which means I'm going to leave him there, and I'm going to actually put the artillery up here, which, you know, just to make sure that there is no screwing around that occurs at a very important bridge crossing. And now what it really comes down to is how do I want to distribute my attack and what more do I want to put into reserve. So because... Let's take a look at the TEC. I'm looking at the TEC to basically determine the maths of all the, especially major rivers. Truck leg all leg. Yeah, that's not really, there's no possibilities left to work with there. Yep, okay. So I fueled up the 10th motorizer, and because the 10th motorizer is fueled up, I think I just want these guys to be part of a combat operation to... So with Bykov, I do know what's underneath that unit in Bykov. It's an airborne unit because it's part of the setup. I will throw in this guy for the action rating. I'll put him on top of the trucks to make sure the trucks are safe. The tank unit, attacking into a swamp is not great with tank units, so I don't really foresee that as the world's wisest choice. What do we got here? 2 action. Yeah, I'm not going to dedicate any more resources to Bykov because I don't think there's much of an opportunity to exploit it because the bridge is covered and the unit is intact. So I'm going to dedicate the rest of the 3rd Panzer to Mogilev over here, and I will send these units with them. With Mogilev being the Schwerpunkt, I want to give it as high as a probability of success as possible, which means concentrating artillery assets at the objective. I will put... I also want to do that because the bridge rule, if I just take a look, any Axis combat unit I can put a bridge on, which means I can put our friend here, and I can put our friend here, and they're both eligible to contribute to a barrage on Mogilev, but they're also it's also possible that I can use them for bridging as necessary.
Yeah.
So that's that. And I've managed to do that without touching too much of my very, very important supply stocks. Let's see. I think what I'll do is I'll wrap up my initial movements down here on the southern flank, and perhaps we can do the rest in the next video, because obviously
I
this,
think I think that makes sense because we are
yeah,
at it, I think, for 2 hours now.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
quite lengthy, but
yeah,
this is more of an in-depth video for people
sure.
with the time to watch it. So let's wrap up our initial moves here. I'll just think I'm not. I am. Oh, there we go. I need to have my fog of war correct over here. Um, let's see. So really, the divisions that I have left are the 4th Panzer and the SS Reich. Now the question is, do I want to put those in? Where do I want to put those in? How do I want to put those in? I'm running out of adjacent hexes to Mogilev for that matter, unless I clear out this unit here, which is a tall order with it being a 3 action rating. So, yeah, interesting question. So, I'm going to do some mental math here. I'm going to assume off the top of my head with a basic calculation that there is approximately 18 combat strength in Mogilev. I could be off, could be a little more, could be a little less, but I'm just going to do that math in my head. Right.
Couldn't possibly comment.
Right? Approximately. And if I DG that, it's going to be approximately 9, and I already know that there's an action rating of 4 in there, which is now a 5, and if it gets a DG, it goes down to a 4. So, how do I want to play this? I could even still whittle it down with an overrun now if I just wanted to kill that AI unit. It really depends. Like, do I want to run my luck? If I do an overrun with a group of units, I'm not going to be able to get a good result on the table. Do I want to barrage it with artillery in the hope of inflicting some kind of loss that will smooth things out a bit? It's really difficult to say. Or do I just want to save my money
Hmm.
and not attack Mogilev altogether?
Hmm.
Perhaps I could attack the 3 action rating division and use exploitation units to position themselves on the northern Dnieper as well, so that there are so many units on the Dnieper it's impossible to garrison. Questions, questions, questions.
That's what's so great about OCS.
Indeed. Um, yeah, you know what? I think I will settle on a Bykov attack, and I will forego a Mogilev attack, but I will attack and destroy the northern part of Mogilev, and that will be the nut that I crack to go start. Oh, well, I could also just deploy units from the Orsha flank along the river there. Interesting question. Because I just, with 6 regimental equivalents in Mogilev, I do not see myself, for the price of investment, inflicting enough losses to actually crack it. Um, but also at the same time, do I see myself possibly attacking across the river in exploitation at Bykov? The math on that, it is open terrain, which is good.
Yeah,
Major,
it's a
major,
hedgehog.
major river. Major river attack would be possible due to the bridge being there and doing the combat phase, but armor would be a quarter, mechanized would be a third, and anything else would be halved. So it would be
Hmm.
a risky gambit. But looking at the math at face value, if I can DG it, if I can bring it down to 6 combat strength and a modified 2 action rating, if I can put a 5 action rating up against it, it wouldn't be that hard
Hmm.
to dedicate enough combat power of other variety to give myself at least a 3 to 1 and a +3 action rating, which is safely reliable enough to cross the river. So,
I mean, you don't even have to. I mean, if you do get an exploitation result after your combat into Bykov, you could also just take an infantry unit and move it into this
correct.
hex. I
Correct.
mean, that
Thus giving
compromises my
myself,
decision.
yeah, thus giving myself a pretty safe crossing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to hold that.
Yeah, yeah. So now bridging, as I understand it in this case, would simply reduce a major river to a minor river. Is that how it
Right, I think you
third?
always go one level down. Yeah,
Yeah,
major to minor, minor to
it's
non-existent.
covered in 13.8b if I ever forget. So 13.8b. Yeah, degrades a minor of yep. So the major of hexide down to minor of hexide. So I'm obviously gonna want to capture a road at Mogilev as soon as possible. But you know what? I yeah, I will place the SS Reich in reserve, and I will place the 4th Panzer in reserve. I will not fuel them. I will save my money. I'll place everything in this hex in reserve simply because HQs can be in reserve and still do HQ functionality. That's correct, right?
That
Yeah.
is that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not actually planning on moving that, but I am planning on moving this guy over here. So I'm going to put this HQ into reserve. I'm just going to move it onto the reserve marker that 10th Panzer is sharing.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to check my trace supply situation to
Can
make
I
sure.
just ask you, did you just pay for fueling this HQ when you
I
moved it?
did, I did. Let me
Okay,
ask that since
right.
I now
No,
have
no,
the.
I'm fine. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that.
No, no, it's a normal question to ask.
Um,
Very normal, and you'll find yourself as a player, dear viewer, asking that question quite a lot.
right, and I find myself forgetting these things often. That's why
Yeah.
I ask.
Now, as you can see, I'm modifying my fog of war as I go, even for units that I might have moved a while ago. Make a habit of changing it whenever you see it, and the most important thing is that when you hand the game back over to your opponent, make sure your fog of war is in order. That's the most important time to do it. It's not absolutely necessary to have it perfect every minute of your turn, but definitely make sure it's perfect when you hand over to your opponent. So I'm going to keep those guys in reserve so as to be economical with my supplies. And yeah, we're going to go for Bykov down there. And that pretty much finishes up our movement for this part of the map. And for now, that will finish up this video. In part 2, I will continue the German first turn. I'm not even sure if we'll quite finish it, but I think we might. And we will go through the first turn for the Russian player as well. Thank you for joining us. And I suppose we will see you next time.
We will. Auf Wiedersehen.